Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Building It Online podcast, a podcast all about the successes, failures, and learnings from growing businesses online.
All right, guys, today we're here with Dayette from Answers Wanted to share his story about entrepreneurship as a path to personal development. Daniel and I have been members of a digital marketing community I've been in there for a few years. How long have you been in there, Daniel?
I've been in the ad skills community for a couple of years now.
Okay. Yeah, same here. So we just connected a couple of weeks ago, and he told me a story about his path to entrepreneurship and some of the things that he'd been through that led him to his business today. And I thought it was beyond worth sharing. It's a really motivating story for anybody in this space. So without going too much in detail, I'll let you tell the story there, Daniel. Why don't you tell us what you do today, and then let's go to the backstory about how you got there.
Sure. Well, today I run an email marketing agency. That's what we focus on these days. And started that in 2008. And today we employ 9 people plus 3 or 4 subcontractors. And it's doing exceptionally well now.
What got you started in email marketing?
Wow, that's a long story. But I guess the interesting part is, so we used to do everything, like all businesses start off kind of not knowing what niches to pick and how to focus. And so we did websites, we did social, we did SEO, we did the whole 9 yards. And one of our pay-per-click ads clients really took off. We built a list of over 680,000 opt-ins for them in a really short period of time. I think it was like 6 months or something. And, we built up all that stuff into email campaigns, obviously, and started marketing to them. And funny thing is that we actually had one of our Aweber accounts shut down and deleted on us. And, never thought to back up the list or anything like that. And so without making this a really long story, the bottom line is that, obviously I got the account back and I learned about deliverability, and I learned about, I hired a Linux guru expert person who walked me through all the technical aspects. And I found myself being an advocate from the marketing people group to the tech people group, and being interviewed and being, asked to build commercial email servers in the Amazon cloud for internet marketers all over the world. So did over 25 of the really big installs. And, it just became, this thing for me. And then obviously being a copywriter by nature already, it was just a natural flow.
Nice. So I've actually had a little bit of experience in a similar space there started out in in email marketing about 10 years ago. But as recent as I believe 3, we were doing the same thing with changing over ESPs from a NetSuite company that I was working with, going over to Bronto, since Bronto and NetSuite started working together. And it was a huge project with getting everything ported over, and then wound up having to change the actual ISP going in as well. So I understand the complexities that can be in there.
Definitely.
So you said you've got 9 employees that are working with you and 3 or 4 subcontractors. You're based out of US or Canada?
I'm based out of the Vancouver, Canada area, I guess you could say, really close to the US border. And I tend to do a little bit of business on both sides, but yeah.
Nice. It's exciting.
It's a convenient location to kind of go from both places. I have one business that operates out of Bellevue, Washington, and one that's operating here in Vancouver, Canada.
Nice. Now, how many businesses do you run right now?
Just 3.
3? Just 3. As if that's simple.
Yeah. Well, I find that a person shouldn't actually operate too many businesses. And I personally actually, whenever I decide to go into another business, I usually try and assign an SPA, or a single point of accountability, a manager, if you will. And I try not to let that be me.
Yeah, that's smart. That's actually good advice for everyone that should be listening to this. Now, are all 3 of those businesses in email marketing?
No. One is in the sport health niche, and one is in the pet space.
All right. And why don't we go back a little ways? I know that when we were talking previously, you had told me about the story of your come up into entrepreneurship, and it was not at all what I expected to hear.
Yeah. So do you want me to just kind of mention all that stuff I told you?
Yeah, if you don't mind, just going all the way back to the beginning and tell me what the path was to get here.
Yeah. I mean, as I mentioned, when I was a kid, I kind of had a really difficult start. I mean, I was hospitalized at Children's Hospital here in Vancouver in 1990. I was diagnosed with a whole bunch of things that Actually, I was reading that paper just the other day. I keep it in my drawer here sometimes as a reminder, just to kind of how bad it was. But basically, they said in there that that I had speech disabilities. They said that I had learning disabilities. They said that I had signs I may have schizophrenia, all kinds of different things, and that I was going to have. Oh, the language disorders was another one. Basically, they said I had all these issues and that I was basically not going to have a normal life, and that I should just give up. And I remember actually even my dad just saying, you know what, just wait until you can get on disability and you'll be good to go. So
really,
and my dad struggled with alcohol for the pretty much the first 3/4 of my life. And my mom obviously wasn't doing well through that either. So, like school kind of didn't work for me. I dropped out in grade 10 and I just thought, well, that was going to happen anyways. Cause, I had this story that of course everybody tells you, right? Like, if you tend to, when you're younger, if everybody says these things about you, especially professionals, you think, well, it must be true,
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of funny that, I just kind of I wound up not believing anything that these people said, but
did that take a lot of time to get to that point? Because I'm sure as people are telling you, it's like, wow, this is my fate,
Oh yeah, no, it took a really long time. In some ways, I kind of wish it hadn't happened that way, but in a lot of ways, I guess it's a good thing because it worked out. But yeah, no, it took a while. I mean, like, I did, all through high school, I believed that story. And even when I was 19 or 18, I think it was, I left home and, I tried doing odd jobs. I ended up moving to Edmonton, where there was lots more work. Back then, the economy was kind of horrible and there wasn't a lot of jobs here. And I wound up sleeping behind the 7-Eleven, broke and, trying to collect welfare in Alberta. And that was kind of like rock bottom for me. I mean, like, there was, that was kind of the lowest point where that was the kind of the whole start for me.
So you've gone from essentially sleeping behind a 7-Eleven with no job, nowhere to go, to running 3 businesses that are making you significant amount of money now, right?
Correct. Yeah.
That's crazy. So what was how did you get from the 7-Eleven to the next step? Not where you are today, but that first part.
Yeah. So, they're all really little baby steps, but so actually, let me tell you the grinder stuff that I didn't message you about. Mm-hmm. So from the sleeping behind the 7-Eleven thing, the very first thing I did was I went to this job program thingy, and basically they found me this job, and I found out that I had a relative that I'd never ever spoken to or met in my entire life, who lived 2 hours bicycle ride away from where I was. And so I got a job and I commuted every day on a 10-speed bicycle that I had been given 2 hours from this place called Onaway, Alberta, to Spruce Grove, Alberta, every day, back and forth, uphill one way, downhill the other, and to work backbreaking labor in a plastic factory. And actually, if you want to really hear the grind, I mean, truth is, I actually lost that job because I snuck what do they call it, granola bar that wasn't mine because I was hungry in my...
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so it was pretty rough, right?
Yeah.
And then, so I got fired for that, but anyway, so I ended up getting a job as at a call center for Hewlett Packard, and it's kind of funny growing up, being a computer nerd. When they told me I got to answer the phone and make notes at the same time, I was like, really? That's the hardest part? Okay. I'm like, that's like a classic game of or night of gaming or BBSing or being on an IRC online, So anyway. Long story short, I was doing pretty well with the call center thing. I was pretty good at diagnosing internet problems really quickly over the phone. And then we lost that project. Ended up, I found out that they were shipping this project to a place called Stream in Chilliwack, which is funny. And that's like 30, 40 minutes from my parents' house back in, BC. So I ended up being able to move home. And then what's that called? And then my cousin told me this place called the Internet Marketing Center was hiring in Vancouver, and, they were hiring for internet marketing coaches. Now, here's the crazy part. Okay. Like, they found out that I was currently working in technical support, and they were like, no, we're not going to give you the coaching job. You can have the technical support job, which was like $20K a year less.
Oh, wow.
And I said to Travis, I said, well, what's it going to take to become a coach? And he was like, no, that wouldn't work for you. And so anyways, I kept bugging him. And one day he says, how about this? You can try it for 30 days. And if you can't hack it, you're fired. And I was like, sweet, let's do it. And they thought I was joking, but I was totally serious. So I coached for 4 years.
Nice.
From 2004 to 2008, which is funny because, like, again, 30 days, right?
Take it you did well.
I did very well. Yeah. So I was really good at upselling people to sessions. Remember that learning disability, though. One funny thing back in the day, before I learned how to manage my junk, I actually had to, if I upsold somebody and they gave me their credit card number over the phone, I would get one of the customer service ladies to listen in on the call because I couldn't figure out how to write down a stream of numbers like that.
Just the credit card numbers.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I did learn strategies on how to do that all by myself. But at the time, I just, like, those were the kind of things that I would struggle with, but didn't stop me from closing big deals. And, sessions were $1,000 a piece. And I used to not only do the coaching, but, like, if my clients wanted more sessions, like, most of my clients stuck around for more sessions, and I would upsell them. And, the company had big contests and I would win those. I won a computer one year.
Wow.
But anyway, yeah. So,
wild.
Yeah. So I coached people on how to build an online business from scratch. And, couple of my clients even made it into secrets of their success, which was Corey's, people who made over 200 grand within the 6 or 8 week program. So now, funny thing is, my first kid was born, and, in 2008, my daughter, Ashley, and I said, I'd like some time off. They said, no. I said, I really would just like even like a couple of weeks off, even unpaid would be fine. I just need some time off. They said, no, we really need you right now. I said, well, have a nice day. And that was my first like $25,000 month as an entrepreneur, was like just saying goodbye to the job. And it's funny, I never knew that I would make that money. I didn't walk out of there with a solid plan and I'm going to do this and this and this. I was totally thinking, like, you know what, my job should not matter as much as my family should. So goodbye.
Right. So when you left that day, did you have something in mind to do, or were you just like, I'm going to figure something else out and spend time with my family?
Well, no, I had some irons in the fire. I mean,
okay.
But I didn't have, like, none of them were confirmed. I didn't know if they would actually work out. But
right.
Basically, through all those years of coaching, I'd obviously made friends with some of the other coaches that had come and gone. Some of the other coaches were quite successful people. And, being where the office is in downtown Vancouver, there's a lot of other marketing agencies. And I kind of developed a bit of a reputation as a nerd, I guess you could say, somebody who would just grind and figure things out, so there was, people that, so anyways, I met up with a guy who had connections with some of the agencies in Los Angeles, and we ended up closing Advantage Rent-A-Car. We ended up closing, some other big companies. We even did side projects for companies like Skechers Shoes, Disney Interactive, like, things like that. And, it was really just networking. Heck, I read a blog the other day that was saying that if you just, if you need like major money right now, like right this second, all you should do is pick up the phone, network, and like talk to people who, you have in your circle, and you'd be surprised how much business and opportunity is just sitting in your circle.
Right.
And for me, like that first, what do they call it? I guess it was almost like reverse FU money, if it's the Dan Locke style thing, right? Like it was almost like first I gave up first I said goodbye, and then I got the money. But regardless, like in that first 30 days, I wasn't trying to do that. I had a nest egg enough that I could, amble along for 2-3 months. And I basically, during that time, I just started making phone calls and talking to the right people and explaining my capabilities and, building pitch decks and just, putting together a program. And before I knew it, we had this massive office in, Coquitlam, and we had, foosball table matches, and we had back then we even had 10 staff. We had a front reception desk lady, the whole 9 yards.
Wow.
It went really big. I bought a Porsche. Actually, much to my wife's chagrin, I bought 3 Porsches, but yeah, it was pretty wild. Actually, it was unbelievable back then.
What a ride. No,
that was almost my Wolf of Wall Street years.
Yeah.
Without the crazy stuff, because I was, married. But
yeah, I was gonna say, you say back then. So what's the difference between back then and now? How's the setup? Do you still have your office? And
no, so as you probably know, in 2009 we had the big crash. The 3 main car manufacturers went to the government with their hands out, and the economy kind of tanked. One of my biggest clients, which was like a $19,000 a month retainer, what do they call it, was owned by Chrysler. And so, at the time, what I did was I literally just restructured and got rid of the expensive office, because, you really don't need it. In fact, to be honest with you, I'd never at that point met any of my clients, so it didn't need it. Yeah. So I shut that all down, and I basically sent everybody home and said, we'll just all work at home on contract, and as we need each other, we'll pull each other back in and again and such. And so there was definitely some lean years and some tough years, but in fact, for the first few years, I used to always use sales guys because I didn't think I could close a deal. And then in more recent years, we don't have any sales guys. I close most of the deals, or they just happen organically. Actually, now we've our lead marketing manager, she closes a lot of deals herself. So that's actually really working out well. But anyway, long story short, yeah. So today we don't actually bother having a physical office. We operate out of our homes, but we do have, and when I say homes, the basement suite of my house is basically like an office anyway.
Like a home office, yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of nice enough I can just call it the office if I wanted to. But we also have a team that likes to work out of an office in Surrey, which is about 40 minutes from here. They all just like to just kind of almost like what's that called, Silicon Valley style, just like all work from a communal house.
Yeah.
But I know some people would say, well, that's your formative years, and you'll probably want to expand from that or whatever. But to be honest, I find that the well-being and how happy people are to come to work is way better this way. We all just enjoy our own personal space, making a coffee whenever you want. And,
I feel like it takes a lot of structure in the business and really knowing, what the metrics are that you're trying to measure in order to have that work. But as long as those are in place, I completely agree. The well-being and the flexibility and the overall trust that you give your employees outweighs, seeing them in the office every day tenfold.
Absolutely. You have to have score sheets. You have to have systems and processes. And each person has to have a place where they can work quietly. Like if you have somebody who lives in shared accommodation or has a small house and a big family or something, obviously, you're that's one of the reasons that a group of our people like to work together in one of my main marketing manager's house places there. Yeah. But, if it came down to it, I might even, if I had to, I could just rent another office or send somebody to co-working spaces and just pay for it for them. But
right. So that's what I do here, because my girlfriend and I are traveling, and we work co-working spaces just because the house is so small and she's in and out all day long. It's difficult to do any sort of calls or really just dive in and focus. Whereas the WeWork helps a lot, but it also allows us the flexibility to go to any of the major cities and immediately set up shop. So this story is motivational on a million different levels. I know that my journey was significantly different. I feel like every entrepreneur that I talk to has their own, unique twist on this, but to hear that you've gone from, behind a 7-Eleven in 2001, sleeping behind a 7-Eleven in 2001 to, owning or having a $19,000 a month client in a big office in the middle of Vancouver it just shows that anybody, anything can happen if you put your mind to it. So
yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I remember one defining moment was when I moved from that call center, which was in the middle of nowhere in Chilliwack, to that job in Vancouver. Turns out that was the same week that they were doing the the yearly boat cruise for the company, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's really funny that I was like literally living in like farmland, making like 30K a year, to going to this big Vancouver company where I had to, dress up and commute an hour and a half to work. And this particular, and like literally in a span of a couple of weeks, here I was sitting on a yacht, sipping a rye and Coke, cruising in the harbor, from that job. So there was some, some moments along the way where it was like, yeah, like this is probably where things need to go.
Yeah. Looking at one hand versus the other. Totally.
Yeah.
So if you had to pick one point of your journey so far, what would you say the hardest part of your entrepreneurship journey was?
Wow. You know what? I don't know. I guess probably the hardest part was, it's just those first early years where like I had no idea like how to start a business or, whether it was going to work out or whether any of this stuff was going to happen. I mean, like probably two different points. One part was like, that those years where I literally had nothing. Like, I mean, the year I moved to Edmonton, like my laptop got stolen, my ID got stolen. Like I literally had nothing other than a borrowed bike and, flyers looking for jobs. Like those years were probably the hardest because I never even knew like where food was going to come from.
Yeah.
And then the secondary part was, there was, the second point that was really difficult was when I was scaling this company. And again, like I said, I think every entrepreneur on earth needs to learn sales skills like ASAP. Like if you're starting a business, if you're planning to be any part of that business, you have to figure out sales. And you can't outsource that, because if you don't understand what you're outsourcing, I mean, you do need to outsource it at some point, but in the early years, you need to understand it, because otherwise, I had 3 different sales guys that took me for a bit of a ride. Heck, even if they were listening to this, they know they took me for a bit of a ride, because I was like,
when you say took me for a ride, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, it means that, you don't get a nice piece to the pie. You don't get the better half of the deal when it comes to the closed deal. It means that, what do they call it? Maybe there was more leads that could have closed, but, there was just other priorities for that person.
Yeah.
Just things like that. And I think like when you know how to sell, you can manage that. So there was some years where I grinded really, really hard, not knowing that I could have outsourced those things, or that I could have done those things myself, or that I could have taken charge of those things. And, I learned really quickly that basically the best way to learn how to be a good salesperson is to obviously find people with needs, and don't be a sleazy whatever, literally be there listening for their pains and listening for what they need, and then deliver what they need. And if you can't help them with what they need, then don't sell them anything. Right. But I mean, it's as long as you're finding the ideal prospect, I mean, and they have that need, then you're not even really being sleazy. You're just there to help them out.
Right.
And I find that's my fancy sales process.
Love it.
Don't be sleazy. Give people what they need and serve them well. Right.
There's too many people out there that are doing the opposite of that are just trying to make a buck and taking money from people that really don't need anything that they have. So I agree with that.
Yeah.
So just wrapping up here, is there, looking back at the hardest part of your journey and not knowing, where the next check was going to come from, if it was all going to work out, and just having so many variables up in the air as you grind through it, is there any advice that you'd give anybody that's going through that right now? I would say right away, like find somebody who's been where you want to go, or even just the next step of where you want to go, and tell them, that you would like to ask them for advice here and there. I think that most people would be shocked how many entrepreneurs love kind of helping mentees, even if it's just with the odd question here and there. I think that, and then obviously again, that point of, learn sales no matter what, and figure out who your ideal prospect is. And if you can't figure out who your ideal prospect is, pick something, and then don't deviate from it. Because if you chase too many rabbits, you go home hungry, which is why even when I see an extremely lucrative opportunity where I can buy up a business that's producing, 20,
10, 15 grand a month, and, I can buy it for, 5 or 10 grand. I can't say no to that, but then I can't focus on that or I'll go home hungry. So,
Yeah.
You always focus on one thing. And to this day, like, my core thing is I personally focus on one thing.
That's awesome. That's really good advice. So if anybody has questions for you or wants to get in contact with you, do you have a method for them to do that?
Ironically, being an email guy, email is the best way to reach me, and info@answerswanted.com is the best way to reach me.
Awesome.
Everyone, thanks so much for joining us today. I hope you got some good takeaways from what Daniel said. He's got a lot of experience in this space. He's got a really motivating story. So anybody that doesn't think that they're capable of doing something, just go back to the part where he was sleeping behind a 7-Eleven and now is in quite the opposite situation. If you can, give us a follow on any of the podcast players that you guys listen to. We try and put them on every podcast player around. And if you could, leave us a review. We read all of the reviews that we get on iTunes. So let us know what you think here. If you have any ideas or know anybody that would like to be on the podcast, all of our contact information will be in the show notes.